Congressman, as I'm sure you know, Senator put his mouth out this week now with Secretary of deal. Is that enough in your mind to have that arrangement fixed, or would you like to see more progress on that from what she was able to get for the state and national security?
Well, the senator and I met. We met as a delegation actually with Mark Amadei on last Thursday. The plutonium shipment and her discussions with the secretary came up. We had been working collaboratively to try to hold the Department of Energy accountable. On her side, obviously using the power and the position that she has as a senator. On our side, with the Democratic majority, with oversight in congressional hearings. And the commitment that she's gotten out of the secretary is, specific around when this material, half metric ton of plutonium, will be transported out of our state and into New Mexico, which is where ultimately it was supposed to be. So this is, the step that needed to be taken in order to get some assurances from the department, but we're not going to rest there. We are actually scheduling time to go out and do an on-site inspection in a classified setting in order to ensure that it is safe while it's here, and that we have a full plan of action for when it will be transported to New Mexico and ensuring Nevadans are safe. So it's a top priority, as is the Yucca issue, which we'll be dealing with this week.
You say we, do you mean the rest of the congressional delegation, you and your staff? What do you mean by we?
Well, we're working collaboratively as a delegation on all of these issues, the plutonium shipment as well as the Yucca Mountain.
Do you mean the Yucca Mountain in Trump's efforts to basically restart that with his funding budget? Is that what you're referring to?
Correct. So the president has $116 million in his proposed budget plan that would begin the process to restart Yucca Mountain. And so there are two hearings this week on the Senate side. The Senator Rosen and Senator Nasto are working to address, and then on the House side, we've been meeting with our appropriators on the Appropriations Committee to ensure that we have language that protects Nevada and our interests, and that no taxpayer money is used to start up Yucca Mountain.
So the chair of Ways and Means said he wants to take up the Medicare for All bill at some point. What keeps you from co-sponsoring that?
Well, we are having congressional hearings. I'm on the Budget Committee as well as the Ways and Means Committee, and we're having hearings in Rules, Budget, and Ways and Means, which was part of the understanding that the Speaker had with the proponents of the legislation. I think, as I've told you, I am for universal health care. I believe that health care is a right and not a privilege. With this current administration, it is currently in federal court trying to take away not just pre-existing conditions, but literally weaken the entire Affordable Care Act as we know it. That is the fight that is in front of us, and my job is to make sure that we protect the health care that we have. That means protecting the Affordable Care Act, protecting employer-sponsored insurance, as well as veterans care and Medicare, which overwhelmingly is what Americans rely on for their health care, while we debate and discuss all of the other options that are out there to move to a single-payer system, Medicare for All being one of those proposals.
Are you open to signing on, or you think there's just some fatal flaws with the?
Well, I think you know me by now. I'm a deliberative person, and I like to allow the debate. It's one thing to talk about it during a campaign. Now that I'm elected and I serve on the Committee on Ways and Means, and I'm on the subcommittee on health, so we're dealing with healthcare issues literally every week. And so I'm ready to tackle universal health care, as I am currently tackling the issue of prescription affordability. I mean, I believe we can do both well, and I'm focused right now on moving our prescription affordability bill, which we were able to get out unanimously out of committee, which is a pretty remarkable thing, particularly in this partisan environment.
Have you met with any of the 2020 candidates for president? And if so, what are you telling them on advice on how to campaign in Nevada?
Yeah, we meet with anyone who is interested in running for the Democratic nominee for president. Nevada, as you know, is an early presidential caucus state. We matter. And what I tell them is you must engage here early. This is a caucus, and so you have to organize and have dedicated resources, local and in-state, in order to be effective. You can't take it for granted, and you can't wait. So I know that many of the candidates have been here, and whenever I have an opportunity to meet with them, I try to do so.
Any specific ones that you've met with?
You name it, I've probably met with them or
Sorry.
talked to them.
Sorry. No, you go.
Just curious, Congressman, not expecting to make a big announcement here in front of all of us, but do you think you're going to endorse any candidates before the caucuses in February?
We'll wait and see what I decide to do, but I will be active, as I was before in the presidential process. You know, we have a lot at stake in the 2020 cycle, notwithstanding the fact that we have an unindicted co-conspirator in the White House that we all need to do the best we can to elect an alternative to lead this country forward.
Congressman, this is a question I'm asking all of Nevada's federal representatives on the issue of housing affordability. I know that's more of a local and state issue, but nevertheless, sometimes you guys can help. If you were asked by a constituent, what can we expect from your office or anyone to help with that issue, what would your answer be?
We are actually working on a comprehensive immigration package, which will include investments in housing affordability. Chairwoman Maxine Waters has already had hearings on the subject. I was a former member on the Financial Services Committee, the subcommittee on housing. So we have been talking with her office about ways that we can add proposals to that package. But ultimately, the infrastructure package has to come to the Ways and Means Committee because we have to propose the funding mechanism. So one way or the other, whether it's on the policy side in the Committee of Jurisdiction or when it comes to the Budget or Ways and Means Committee, we'll have an opportunity to add our voice to the issue. And housing affordability is a great issue, a grave issue, I should say, that we're hearing about from constituents on a regular basis.
And interesting you mentioned it's coming from the immigration's part of this. Is it kind of like a deal to get votes on this, or?
Well, infrastructure package.
Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah. So the president and the congressional leaders met last week. The president agreed to a $2 trillion number on infrastructure. That's a comprehensive plan from roads and highways to broadband to, again, infrastructure for housing affordability as well as school construction and renovation, all of which would be beneficial for the state of Nevada. And one of the reasons that I support a bipartisan comprehensive immigration
Infrastructure.
infrastructure package. I support that too.
The House Judiciary, it looks like, is getting ready to start proceedings for contempt of court against Attorney General Barr. Do you think this is the right direction that they should be going down, or do you think that there are other avenues they should be exploring?
Yes, I do think the Attorney General needs to be held in contempt. He is violating his responsibility as the Attorney General. He is not the Attorney General for the President. He is the Attorney General for the United States of America, and they have a responsibility to work with Congress. We are a co-equal branch of government, and under Article 1 of the Constitution, we have the oversight and accountability role of the executive branch, which includes the Attorney General's office. So if the Attorney General fails to respond, provide information, come forward to give testimony, then we have no other choice but then to hold him in contempt. That's not the action any of us want to see. We would prefer to see the administration and the Attorney General working to provide this information in a transparent, forthcoming manner. But in the end, the American people deserve to know the truth and to have all of the facts available to them. And that's the role that we have in Congress, is to bring that information forward.
silly question along the same lines of the upcoming 2020 election. Do you think the Democrats can win?
Yes.
Simply that. That they can't screw it up. That this is definitely not exactly in the bag, but possible to win.
Oh, well, look, it's a competitive environment. The primary is competitive, and the general will be competitive. But no matter what, Nevada will play a critical role in deciding not only who our Democratic nominee will be, but I believe ultimately will play a pivotal role in deciding the next president of the United States, as we have done for the last few election cycles.
Speaking of Nevada's role, Nevada just actually, I think have they enacted the national popular vote? That hasn't been signed yet, but they're going through it right now, and I think we're getting close to almost the 200 electoral vote threshold. What are your thoughts, talking about Nevada's role in the presidential? A lot of people have criticized this as possibly reducing Nevada's role. What are your thoughts on Nevada possibly joining that compact?
I'll leave that to the state. The legislature actually is looking at that. My friend, Assemblyman Tyrone Thompson, was actually one of the sponsors of that legislation. So where it will go from here, I don't know, but that's really a decision for the state legislature to make. And whatever we do, we need to protect Nevada's role as an early presidential caucus state. We've done too much to raise Nevadans' ability and our voice to have a say in selecting not just our Democratic nominee, but ultimately the person who becomes the president. And we've done a pretty good job of it in the last 3 cycles, so hopefully we'll continue to have that track record.
Metro has a 287G agreement with ICE, and there's a lot of cooperation between local jails and ICE routinely without the agreement. Do you think the level of cooperation we're seeing is appropriate, or in some way do we need to be scaling that back?
I met with the North Las Vegas chief of police to discuss a number of issues, including the 287G issue. And the policy, as you know, is kind of a regional one with the individual municipalities. The sheriff takes one approach with the county and the city, and North Las Vegas kind of has a separate but compatible policy. And so I believe that what they have in place right now is fair, but that it needs to continue to be reviewed, particularly in the environment that we're in as it pertains to targeting of immigrants. I've heard from constituents, some of whom are not undocumented, who feel like they have been profiled, and so we need to ensure that that does not occur in any regard, and that's part of what I relayed to the North Las Vegas police chief when I met with her.
Do you see any role for yourself or the legislature in trying to make sure that discrimination doesn't happen?
Absolutely. So, well, on the federal level, previously when I was in, we worked with then Attorney General Holder and the COPS division under the Department of Justice to actually provide for training to local law enforcement around anti-profiling and reduce of force issues. From that process, Metro actually was recognized as being one of the law enforcement agencies that had a best practice, and it was actually showcased as a model for what other law enforcement agencies should be doing. So yeah, we have been involved in that issue previously, and will continue to be involved at the federal level to make sure that we're supporting our local law enforcement, but also ensuring that the right policies are in place that protect the interests of law-abiding individuals. So the tie is obviously the federal government provides a lot of money to local law enforcement. And so that was part of our bill, was to ensure that no federal money was being sent to local law enforcement agencies unless they had the right policies in place around anti-racial profiling as well as reduce of force measures.
You spent a lot of your time in the speech tonight in remembrance of former Assemblyman Thompson. If I may ask, obviously there's not the obvious reason why, but why?
Tyrone is a dear friend, and the unexpected loss and his death is, it's a shock to all of us. I literally was just texting with him a few days ago about some policy issue that he wanted my advice on. And so I've known Tyrone, as I said, for decades. It's more than just a colleague in a building that I've worked with. It's someone who I have shared work in the community and on behalf of the same neighborhoods. I mean, his assembly district is within the Senate district that I previously represented, as well as the Congressional district. So we've been friends for a long time, and I of course, send my condolences to his family. I've talked to his mother, and I will continue to do whatever I can to support their family and all of his friends and colleagues as we heal through this process.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because, as a point of perspective, you're back in the United States House after a little bit of time away, and in the majority as well. And you also were an occupant of this building as well. And if you can speak to what's the difference between then and now?
Then being my perspective here as a former state legislator. I mean, it's great to see the progress that our leaders have made, not only on issues that matter around education and healthcare, mental health issues, but the leadership that we have. I mean, Speaker Frierson and I went to college together. He was the student body president. I was his vice president. So it's a great honor to be able to come in and speak to him now as a member of Congress, and he's the presiding member over the Assembly, and similar friends throughout the building. So I'm just honored to serve the state of Nevada and to be a representative fighting for the people of Nevada's 4th. We've got a lot of work to do. You know, things aren't peachy in D.C. right now, so we've got a lot of work to do, but with the right leaders, we can get it done.
Just in closing, Congressman, just curious, you said a lot of things about impeachment on the campaign trail. With the release of Robert Mueller's report, did anything in that change the equation for you, where you're thinking about whether or not the president should, or the House should begin impeachment proceedings against the president?
Well, what I've said is it should not be taken off the table, but we need to first get all of the information from the Mueller report, the unredacted report, not the summary from the Attorney General, but the full report. We need to be able to hear directly from Special Counsel Mueller now, especially since his account and the Attorney General's account conflict, so that we can understand why he made the findings that he made. There are 10, findings of potential or alleged collusion, and so those are issues that still, I think, need to be vetted out, and the information needs to speak for itself, and then Congress needs to do its job.
Do you think the president or his campaign's actions that were detailed in that report, as redacted as it was, rise to the level of impeachment?
I've read the report. It's really hard to decipher between literally whole sections that are blacked out, but what you can read is pretty damning to the president, to his campaign, and to those around him.
Great. I appreciate the time. Thank you, Congressman.